She had a Rolodex filled with the most powerful names in entertainment, politics, and organized crime. Some called her a businesswoman, others called her a madam. The truth? Buried beneath layers of payoffs, police protection, and whispered rumors. Today, we piece together the evidence and ask, was Gypsy Rose Lee more than just a showgirl? From vaudeville to burlesque queen. She wasn't supposed to be famous. That was her little sister's job. June Hovick was the star, the cute blonde dancer their mother pushed through the vaudeville circuit. Gypsy, she was just there to fill space. But when June ran away to elope at 15, everything changed. Suddenly, Gypsy was the family's only shot at survival. Vaudeville was dying, so their mother, Gypsy Rose Lee, turned to burlesque. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even respectable. But it paid, and that's what mattered. At 15, Gypsy stepped onto the burlesque stage, awkward and unsure. She wasn't the best dancer. She didn't have a perfect body, but she had something no one else did: personality. Most girls undressed quickly. Gypsy did the opposite. She took her time, teasing the audience with jokes and playful glances. She made stripping feel like a conversation. Audiences weren't just watching, they were waiting. She turned the act into something smart, something clever, and it made her a sensation. By the early 1930s, she was the highest-paid burlesque performer in the country. She worked at Minsky's Burlesque in New York, where rich men, politicians, and gangsters filled the front rows. They weren't just there for the show. They wanted to be near her, talk to her, impress her. Gypsy knew how to use that. She paid attention. She learned what powerful men wanted, what they were willing to pay for, and how deals got made behind closed doors. She understood that a connection in the right place could be worth more than a paycheck. Then Hollywood came calling. Studios wanted her to clean up her act. No more stripping, just movies and fame. Gypsy played along, but insiders say she never left the burlesque world behind. Instead, she found a new way to profit from it. By the late 1930s, whispers started. Stories about secret meetings, high-profile clients, and a very private Rolodex. Gypsy had built a powerful network, and if the rumors were true, that network was worth far more than a Hollywood contract. Climbing the ladder of high society. Burlesque made Gypsy Rose Lee famous, but it was her mind, not just her act, that kept her at the top. Unlike other performers, she didn't fade into the background once the music stopped. She was a sharp conversationalist, witty, and always in control. Powerful men didn't just watch her on stage, they wanted to be around her, and she made sure they paid for the privilege. By the mid-1930s, Gypsy wasn't just a burlesque star, she was moving in elite circles. Wealthy businessmen, politicians, Hollywood moguls, and even mobsters sought her company. She played it smart, never letting herself be labeled a mistress or a kept woman. Instead, she positioned herself as a sophisticated entertainer, someone who could hold court at high-end parties, charm the press, and never be seen as just another showgirl. But behind the charm, there were rumors. Some whispered that Gypsy wasn't just making introductions at these exclusive gatherings, she was arranging something more private. She had a little black book, they said, filled with names of the most powerful men in America, and if you had the right amount of money and the right connections, Gypsy could arrange a very special kind of meeting. Unlike the typical Hollywood scandals of the time, nothing about this operation was sloppy. There were no messy affairs, no public breakdowns. Everything was discreet, controlled. The women involved weren't just random showgirls. They were polished, well-spoken, and most importantly, reliable. No one talked, no one got caught. Her ability to stay above the fray was what made her different. Other women in similar positions ended up discarded, blacklisted, or worse. But Gypsy? She only climbed higher. She turned her reputation into something untouchable, even writing a best-selling novel, The G-String Murders, that hinted at the underbelly of burlesque life without ever admitting just how much she really knew. By the time she transitioned to Hollywood, she had built an empire, not just of fame, but of influence. And those who knew the real story understood one thing. Gypsy Rose Lee wasn't just a performer. She was a businesswoman, and she was playing a much bigger game than anyone realized. Hollywood and the illusion of respectability. By the late 1930s, Hollywood wanted her, not as a scandalous striptease act, but as a star. Studios loved her wit, her elegance, and her ability to reinvent herself. She wasn't just another burlesque performer trying to go legit. She looked like she belonged among the elite. Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox saw her as a marketable personality, someone who could bring sophistication to the screen. She landed roles in films like You Can't Have Everything, 1937, and Stage Door Canteen, 1943. But let's be honest, she wasn't a great actress. The real appeal was her image. Hollywood needed women who exuded mystery, glamour, and just enough scandal to keep audiences curious. Gypsy played the part perfectly. But while Hollywood tried to clean up her public persona, insiders whispered that she hadn't left her past behind. Some claimed she was still running a very private, very exclusive side business, one that catered to the same powerful men who once filled the front rows at Minsky's. The rumor? That Gypsy's transition to Hollywood wasn't just about acting, it was about access. She knew the biggest names in entertainment, politics, and high society. She understood what they wanted, how they operated, and, most importantly, how to keep secrets. If the whispers were true, she wasn't just booking movie roles, she was booking appointments. Of course, nothing was ever proven. Gypsy was too smart for that. Unlike other women caught up in Hollywood's vice scandals, she never got careless. No arrests, no police records, no leaked names. Her Rolodex stayed locked away, and those who knew better kept their mouths shut. She also knew how to protect herself. While other women in Hollywood relied on studios to cover up their affairs, Gypsy had something stronger: influence. If you wanted to stay in her good graces, you played by her rules. By the early 1940s, Gypsy had mastered the art of reinvention. She was a respected writer, a Hollywood personality, and an intellectual, far removed from her burlesque roots. But was that all she was? Or had she simply built a better disguise? If she was still running the operation people whispered about, one thing was clear: she was untouchable. The black market of desire. Hollywood in the 1940s was built on illusions. On-screen, stars lived glamorous lives filled with romance and adventure. Off-screen, the industry ran on carefully managed secrets, and some of the most powerful men in the business had very specific desires. That's where Gypsy Rose Lee allegedly came in. The rumors weren't about cheap scandal. They weren't about affairs with co-stars or reckless flings. The whispers claimed Gypsy had turned her connections into a business. She wasn't just a former burlesque queen. She was a fixer, someone who could quietly arrange introductions between wealthy men and hand-picked women. This wasn't Hollywood's usual underground scene, filled with struggling actresses and studio cover-ups. Gypsy's network, if it existed, operated at a higher level. These weren't desperate women looking for a break. They were polished, well-educated, and discreet. It was an exclusive operation meant for clients who could afford absolute silence. Some claim she wasn't in it for the money alone. She understood that power wasn't just about wealth, it was about leverage. If she really was facilitating these arrangements, she knew exactly who was involved. She knew the secrets of producers, politicians, and even crime bosses. That kind of information? Priceless. Of course, none of this was ever confirmed. Gypsy never got caught, never got named in a scandal, never faced legal trouble. If she was running an operation, she ran it perfectly. And that's what made the whispers even louder. Unlike other Hollywood figures who got reckless, Gypsy stayed sharp. She didn't drink excessively, she didn't spiral into addiction, and she didn't leave a trail. The only traces of her alleged second career existed in hushed conversations and the carefully placed hands of men who owed her favors. Was she really the mastermind behind an elite black market of desire? Or was she just someone who knew too much? Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: Gypsy Rose Lee wasn't just surviving in Hollywood, she was thriving. And if she was playing the game, she was playing it better than anyone else. Protection money and police connections. If Gypsy Rose Lee was running a high-end operation, she wasn't doing it alone. Hollywood's underground economy didn't survive on secrecy alone. It thrived because the right people were paid to look the other way. And if the whispers were true, Gypsy understood this better than anyone. In the 1940s Los Angeles, vice squads routinely cracked down on brothels and illicit activities, except for the ones they weren't supposed to find. Certain names never appeared in police reports, certain establishments never got raided, and certain women, no matter how many rumors followed them, never faced charges. Gypsy fit that mold perfectly. Despite her deep ties to burlesque, organized crime, and Hollywood elites, her record stayed spotless. While other showgirls and starlets got swept up in vice investigations, Gypsy remained untouchable. Some insiders claimed she had friends in high places, not just in the entertainment industry, but within law enforcement itself. If she was arranging introductions between powerful men and discreet women, it's likely she ensured those men had no reason to let her operation fall apart. Money talked, but so did information. If Gypsy was as well connected as people believed, she didn't just have cash to offer, she had leverage. She knew who was sleeping with whom, which politicians were making backroom deals, and what Hollywood executives wanted off the record. That kind of knowledge was more powerful than a paycheck. There were also rumors that certain mob figures had her back. During the 1930s and 40s, figures like Bugsy Siegel and Mickey Cohen controlled much of LA's underground scene. They had connections in gambling, drugs, and prostitution, and they knew how to protect their own. If Gypsy had dealings with them, she wouldn't have needed to bribe the police directly. The right people would have made sure she was never on a target list. Despite all the speculation, nothing ever touched her. No arrests, no public scandals, no reckless mistakes. If she was running a business behind the scenes, she managed it with absolute precision. The other women in her network. The women in her orbit weren't just dancers or showgirls, they were handpicked. Unlike the struggling actresses tangled in Hollywood's usual scandals, the women linked to Gypsy were polished, discreet, and connected. They weren't just beautiful, they were well-spoken, well-dressed, and knew exactly how to handle the men they were introduced to. Some came from burlesque, others from society circles, but all had one thing in common. They knew how to keep quiet. Gypsy was careful. She wasn't throwing parties full of reckless young women hoping for a Hollywood break. If the rumors were true, she created an exclusive network. No drama, no scandals, no loose ends. The question is, what did these women get in return? Some likely received financial security. Others gained access to the kind of men who could change their lives overnight. A quiet introduction to a producer, a senator, or a studio head could open doors that talent alone never would. Of course, this was a dangerous game. Women who entered these circles often had short careers and even shorter shelf lives. If they became a problem, they disappeared from Hollywood entirely, blacklisted, silenced, or worse. But Gypsy never ended up like the others. She wasn't a disposable player in someone else's game. She was running it. And if she really had built this network, she had done it better than anyone before her. No arrests, no scandals, no burned bridges. The gangster connection. Hollywood and organized crime weren't separate worlds. They overlapped in ways most people never realized. Nightclubs, gambling, and even studio deals had mob money behind them. And if Gypsy Rose Lee was running a secret business, she likely had protection from some very dangerous men. Her ties to the underworld weren't a secret. She had longtime friendships with figures like Bugsy Siegel, one of the most infamous gangsters of the era. Siegel wasn't just a thug. He was a businessman who built Las Vegas and controlled Hollywood's illegal gambling scene. He knew who was making money and how they were doing it. And yet, Gypsy never seemed to be on his bad side. If she was arranging private meetings for Hollywood's elite, she wasn't stepping on the wrong toes. Some believe she operated with mob approval. or possibly under their protection. There were plenty of reasons for organized crime to keep her safe. If she had wealthy clients who needed privacy, the mob could ensure that privacy stayed intact, for a price. A woman like Gypsy, who knew powerful men's secrets, was far more valuable as an ally than an enemy. Unlike other women who got tangled with gangsters and ended up dead or ruined, Gypsy kept rising. She didn't fall into scandal. She didn't have sudden accidents. She played the game carefully, and if the mob was involved, she made sure she was an asset, not a liability. Of course, nothing was ever proven, but in Hollywood, the people who didn't get arrested often had more to hide than the ones who did. The whispered scandals. In Hollywood, whispers traveled faster than facts, and when it came to Gypsy Rose Lee, the whispers never stopped. She had built a career out of mystery, never saying too much, never getting caught in anything that could ruin her. But the rumors? They told a different story. People in the industry knew. They knew she had connections that didn't make sense. They knew she had money coming from places beyond film and publishing. They knew her name was tied to some of the most powerful men in Hollywood, politics, and organized crime. But nobody dared to say it outright. Gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons, who had no problem exposing other stars, never seemed to dig too deep into Gypsy. The newspapers that loved a scandal never ran headlines linking her to anything beyond burlesque and books. It was as if someone, or many someones, wanted her left alone. Then there were the quiet disappearances. Women who had allegedly been part of Gypsy's network, showgirls, aspiring actresses, even high society women, would simply vanish from Hollywood. Some married wealthy men and moved on. Others weren't so lucky. There were stories of hush money, payments made to keep certain people silent. Women who threatened to talk suddenly had enough cash to disappear. If they didn't take the money? The industry had other ways to erase people. The few who did speak or tried to didn't get far. Their claims were dismissed as jealousy, exaggeration, or wild fantasy. After all, Gypsy was America's most charming burlesque queen, a best-selling author, and a respected entertainer. Who would believe that she had been running something far bigger behind the scenes? That's what made her different. Scandals usually destroyed Hollywood women. A single mistake, a bad romance, a leaked affair, the wrong enemy, could end a career overnight. But Gypsy Rose Lee? She had control. Whatever she was really doing, she did it flawlessly. No arrests, no exposed secrets, no downfall. The sudden retreat and reinvention. By the 1950s, Gypsy Rose Lee started pulling back from Hollywood. It wasn't dramatic. No scandals, no sudden downfall. She just shifted. The burlesque queen who once commanded attention was now more focused on writing, television, and a quieter kind of fame. Some say she saw the industry changing. The old Hollywood power brokers, studio heads, mob-connected club owners, and politicians who had once run the town were losing their grip. New scandals were making headlines, and some of the protections she had relied on were fading. If Gypsy had built something behind the scenes, she knew when to exit gracefully. She didn't disappear. Instead, she reinvented herself again. She became a respected writer, publishing books and hosting TV shows. She played the role of a witty, sophisticated intellectual, someone far removed from burlesque and the rumors that had followed her for years. But people in Hollywood never forgot. The whispers about her alleged side business didn't vanish. They just became part of her legend. Some insiders believed she had simply passed the torch, handing off her network to others who would keep things running. Others believed she had secured enough money and power to retire comfortably, knowing she had outplayed the system. One thing was certain. Gypsy Rose Lee never faced the kind of downfall that wrecked so many others in her world. She left on her own terms, with her reputation intact and her secrets buried. Was she just a brilliant performer who outgrew burlesque and Hollywood? Or was she something far more powerful, a woman who built an underground empire and walked away before it collapsed? Either way, Gypsy knew how to leave the stage while the audience still wanted more. What remained buried? Gypsy Rose Lee took her secrets with her when she died in 1970. No scandals ever surfaced, no hidden records ever emerged. If she had been running an underground operation, she had erased every trace before she left the stage for good. The infamous Little Black Book, the one rumored to hold the names of Hollywood's most powerful men, was never found. If it existed, it was either destroyed or passed into the hands of someone just as careful as she had been. Even decades later, those who knew her never talked. Friends, former colleagues, and anyone who might have been involved stayed silent. That kind of loyalty doesn't happen by accident. Either Gypsy had left nothing behind, or those who benefited from her influence had no reason to expose her. She died as a respected entertainer, an author, and a cultural icon. To the public, she was the burlesque queen who had transformed herself into a Hollywood intellectual. The whispers about what she had really built remained just that, whispers. But in a town where secrets eventually come to light, hers never did. And that might be the biggest proof of all that Gypsy Rose Lee played the game better than anyone.